She thought she was safe. Just another day, just another walk home. But in the blink of an eye, strangers' words and actions shattered that illusion, turning a routine evening into fear she would never forget. The world she trusted suddenly felt hostile, and the injustice she faced wasn't random. It was part of a pattern she couldn't escape. What happened next would expose truths many tried to ignore. Truths about race, power, and the fine line between safety and danger. And this is only the beginning, because what led her here is even more shocking. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Maya had just finished her shift at the local library, carrying a stack of returned books in her arms. Her neighborhood was familiar. Every corner held a memory. Every face she passed usually offered a smile. She loved the routine, the predictability, the small comforts of her life. But that morning something felt off. A group of men lingered near the corner store, eyes following her. Maya tried to ignore them, telling herself it was nothing. Yet deep down, a knot of unease tightened in her chest. Something was about to shatter the sense of safety she had always taken for granted. She didn't know it yet, but this day would expose truths she could never unsee, and would force her to confront a world she thought she knew. Maya tried to shake off the unease, but as she turned the corner, the tension sharpened. The group she had noticed earlier was still there, their eyes following her with a cold, unblinking stare. She quickened her pace, clutching the stack of books closer to her chest. A car slowly rolled down the street behind her, the engine idling just long enough to make her heart race. Inside the store, the clerk gave her a wary glance, as if warning her without words. Outside, the men whispered to each other, their gestures sharp, deliberate. Maya's mind spun. Was it her imagination, or was she being targeted simply for being who she was? Every laugh that cut through the quiet morning sounded louder than it should, every shuffle of feet closer than it seemed possible. She felt exposed, like a deer trapped in headlights, aware that one wrong move could ignite something far worse than words. Then, at the intersection, it happened. One of the men stepped forward, blocking the sidewalk. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low, but carrying enough threat to make her freeze. Her stomach twisted. She wanted to explain, to argue, but she knew reasoning with him wouldn't work. She had learned that day that rules and fairness were invisible to those who wanted to assert power. As she pivoted to retreat, the car behind her revved, inching closer, forcing her against the curb. A few pedestrians walked past, heads down, pretending not to notice. The city, which usually felt alive and protective, suddenly felt hostile, distant. Maya's pulse thundered in her ears, and yet, even in the panic, a spark of resolve ignited. She couldn't let fear define her. Not today. Every step back seemed to tighten the circle around her. The men's whispers grew louder, their posture more aggressive. One of them reached into a bag and pulled out a folded paper, waving it at her in a mocking imitation of authority. "Maybe this will remind you where you don't belong," he sneered. Maya didn't fully understand the threat, but instinctively, she knew it wasn't empty. Her eyes darted, searching for help, for an escape route, but the streets that usually seemed open and welcoming were now a maze of hostility. She felt her chest tighten, the weight of every injustice she had ever witnessed pressing down on her. The subtle looks, the silent refusals, the assumptions based solely on the color of her skin, all of it converged in that moment. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, a sharp sound echoed. Someone had stepped into the street ahead, forcing the car to swerve and the men to halt. Maya froze, caught between fear and hope, knowing that the next few seconds could define the rest of her life. Maya's legs shook as she faced the men blocking the sidewalk, their shadows stretching long under the harsh sunlight. One stepped closer, a sneer twisting his face, while the car idled behind, a silent threat looming. Her chest tightened, lungs burning with the fear she couldn't escape. This was the moment everything she had tried to ignore, the subtle stares, the whispered insults, the everyday dismissals, collapsed into one undeniable confrontation. A sharp laugh cut through the tension, mocking and cruel. Maya's eyes darted for an escape, for anyone who might intervene, but the street was empty. Time slowed, each heartbeat a drum of panic and defiance. The folded paper the man had waved at her now unfolded in his hands like a challenge, a symbol of the authority he wielded to intimidate, to control. Her mind raced. Should she speak? Should she run? She felt the weight of every injustice she had ever witnessed, every story of someone silenced, every instance where fear forced compliance, pressing down on her. And in that unbearable tension, something shifted. Fear didn't vanish, but anger flared, sharp and fierce. She realized this wasn't just about her safety. It was about refusing to let hatred dictate her existence. The men lunged forward, a sudden, threatening motion, but in that instant, a crowd that had been watching silently, people who had passed by moments earlier, stepped forward. Phones lifted, voices rose. The sudden attention fractured the intimidation, forcing the men back. Maya stood frozen, trembling, aware that her fear had collided with collective courage. In those fleeting seconds, the raw power of witness, of being seen, became undeniable. And yet, the moment was fragile. One misstep, one careless move, and everything could spiral again. Maya's heart pounded with the truth she had always known but never faced so directly. The fight for dignity is constant, and courage often comes in the smallest acts of resistance. Maya finally stepped onto her front porch, her hands still trembling, her heart refusing to slow. The danger had passed, but the weight of what she had faced lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. That morning's fear had carved itself into her memory, a reminder that injustice isn't always loud or immediate. Sometimes it hides in the silent stares, the whispered words, the systems that allow bias to fester. She sat on the steps, feeling the adrenaline drain, and realized that what had happened to her was not an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern, one that countless others experienced every day. Being judged, dismissed, or threatened simply because of the color of their skin. Maya understood something essential in that moment. Fear could be powerful, but so could awareness, courage, and the act of speaking out. The world didn't change in a single afternoon. The streets remained the same, the prejudices still present, the dangers still real. But for Maya, something had shifted. She carried with her the knowledge that silence only empowers injustice, and that witnessing, speaking, and standing together could create small ripples of change that might one day become a wave. Her story was more than a personal survival. It was a mirror reflecting society's failures, a call to confront uncomfortable truths. It demanded reflection, empathy, and action. And as she looked out over her neighborhood, Maya knew that the real work wasn't over. The real test was what came next. The courage to live fully, to demand fairness, to insist that dignity is a right, not a privilege. Because if fear is allowed to go unanswered, injustice wins. And the question remains: how many more Mias must face the same moment before the world finally chooses to see, to act, to change?